The Hoh rainforest on Washington's Olympic Peninsula was a world unto itself, a labyrinth of mist and shadow where the air hung heavy with the sour tang of peat. Towering cedars, their boughs draped in moss like ancient shrouds, loomed over bogs that gurgled and sighed as if breathing. The fog curled low, a living thing that swallowed sound and sight, leaving only the squelch of boots on sodden ground and the distant, mournful cry of a red-tailed hawk. In August 2018, this wilderness claimed Dr. Elena Voss, a 34-year-old wetland ecologist whose passion for the bog's carnivorous plants was as fierce as the landscape itself. Elena moved through the bog with the ease of someone who knew its secrets. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, her field boots caked with mud as she knelt beside a patch of sundews, their crimson-tipped tendrils glistening like tiny traps in the weak sunlight. She scribbled in her notebook, her pen scratching notes about Drosera rotundifolia's adaptation to the peninsula's acidic peat. Her research aimed to protect these fragile wetlands, a mission that kept her out here alone, miles from the nearest trailhead. She was meticulous, her backpack stuffed with sample jars, a GPS device, and a silver locket she wore tucked under her jacket, a gift from her brother, Marcus, inscribed with DV and holding a pressed sundew flower. That morning, Elena had radioed her research team at the remote Hoh field station, her voice crackling through static, heading to Quadrant C7, checking sundew density. Expect me back by dusk. The team, a small group of graduate students and a lead botanist, noted her coordinates and went about their work. But dusk came, and Elena didn't return. The sky bruised purple, then black, as a sudden storm rolled in from the Pacific, dumping sheets of rain that turned the bogs into a churning morass. The team waited, their worry growing with each hour. By midnight, with no sign of her, they called the park rangers. Marcus Voss, Elena's older brother and a former park ranger, was at the field station within hours, his pickup truck rattling down the gravel access road. At 38, Marcus was broad-shouldered, with a weathered face and eyes that carried the weight of too many searches gone cold. He knew the bogs better than most, having patrolled them for years before becoming an environmental consultant. His sister's disappearance hit him like a physical blow, but he buried his panic under action, grabbing a topographic map and a flashlight. "She's out there," he told the lead ranger, his voice steady but his hands trembling as he traced her last known route. "Elena knows this place. She wouldn't just vanish." The search began at dawn, a chaotic scramble of rangers, volunteers, and tracking dogs slogging through the mire. The fog was relentless, reducing visibility to a few feet, and the ground was treacherous. Peat bogs could look solid but give way underfoot, swallowing boots or entire bodies into sinkholes. Marcus led a team to Quadrant C7, where Elena had last checked in. They found nothing, no footprints, no dropped gear, no sign of struggle. The storm had erased tracks, turning the bog into a featureless expanse of mud and sphagnum moss. Sammy, a young cocker spaniel not yet part of Detective Sam Harper's life, wasn't there to sniff out clues, and the rangers' dogs, trained for live rescue, found no scent in the rain-soaked terrain. Days turned into weeks. The search teams battled flash floods and shifting marshlands, their shouts muffled by the fog. Marcus combed the bogs alone at night, his flashlight beam slicing through the mist, calling Elena's name until his voice grew hoarse. He found a single clue, a broken sundew stem near a peat bank, its sticky tendrils crushed as if stepped on, but it led nowhere. The rangers concluded Elena had likely misstepped in the storm, fallen into a sinkhole, and drowned, her body claimed by the bog's anaerobic depths where decay was slow and evidence sank deep. By late September, the search was scaled back, then abandoned. The case was classified as a tragic accident, Elena presumed lost to the wilderness. Marcus refused to accept it. She wasn't careless, he told the lead ranger, his voice sharp with grief. Elena could navigate these bogs blind. Something happened. He began his own investigation, sketching maps of the bogs in a battered notebook, marking water flows, sinkholes, and sundew patches with obsessive precision. He interviewed locals, loggers, fishermen, botanists, searching for anomalies, but the wilderness held its secrets tight. The bogs, with their low oxygen and acidic water, were notorious for preserving what they took, from ancient trees to unwary hikers. If Elena was out there, she was hidden in a grave only the bog could keep. In a small Seattle office, a news clipping about Elena's disappearance caught the eye of Detective Sam Harper, a 48-year-old cold case investigator with a reputation for cracking the impossible. Sam was lean and weathered, his graying hair cropped short, his hazel eyes sharp despite the lines etched around them. He'd been working missing persons cases for 2 decades, driven by the ghost of his younger sister, Lily, who vanished during a camping trip 20 years ago. Lily's case was a wound that never closed, pushing Sam to give answers to families like Marcus's, even when he couldn't find them for himself. At his side was Sammy, a 5-year-old cocker spaniel with a glossy chestnut coat and soulful brown eyes, trained to detect human remains and subtle chemical traces. Sammy was more than a partner, he was Sam's anchor, his eager barks and warm nudges a reminder to keep going. Sam read the clipping, his fingers brushing Sammy's ears as the dog curled up at his feet. "Another one lost to the wild," he murmured, his voice low and rough. Sammy tilted his head, as if listening, his tail thumping softly against the floor. The article mentioned Marcus's maps and his refusal to give up, sparking something in Sam, a flicker of recognition, a shared stubbornness. He filed the case away, not yet assigned to it, but the name Elena Voss lodged in his mind like a burr. The bogs were a formidable foe, but Sam and Sammy had faced worse. Somewhere, in that misty labyrinth, a truth was waiting. The rain fell harder now, drumming on the field station's tin roof as Marcus stood outside, staring into the fog. He clutched Elena's locket, a spare she'd left behind, its pressed sundew flower glinting in the dim light. "I'll find you," he whispered, his breath clouding in the chill. The bog was silent, its secrets buried deep, but Marcus's maps were growing, and somewhere, years later, a kayaker would paddle through a hidden channel and find a moss-covered GPS device that would call Sam and Sammy into the fray. The Hoh rainforest bogs didn't yield their secrets easily. In the years following Elena Voss's disappearance in August 2018, the Olympic Peninsula's wetlands seemed to close ranks, their fog-shrouded expanses swallowing any trace of her. The air was thick with the scent of decaying peat, and the squelch of boots on sodden ground became a familiar sound for Marcus Voss, Elena's brother, who refused to let the case die. By September 2025, 7 years had passed, and the bog's silence had hardened into a cold case, its file gathering dust in the Washington State Police archives. But for Marcus, and soon for Detective Sam Harper and his cocker spaniel, Sammy, the silence was a challenge, not an end. The initial search for Elena had been a grueling ordeal. Rangers and volunteers battled relentless fog and treacherous terrain, where solid-looking ground could collapse into sinkholes deep enough to swallow a person whole. The storm that hit the night Elena vanished had turned the bogs into a churning mess, erasing footprints and scattering any debris. Search dogs, untrained for the bog's unique conditions, floundered in the mire, their noses overwhelmed by the sour tang of peat and the constant drip of rainwater. Helicopters were useless in the dense fog, their blades slicing through mist that revealed nothing below. After 3 weeks, with no sign of Elena's backpack, GPS, or body, the Rangers scaled back, their faces grim as they told Marcus the inevitable, "She's gone. The bog took her." Marcus, then 38, stood at the edge of quadrant C7, his boots sinking into the peat as he stared at the spot where Elena had last been. His ranger training told him the odds. Bogs preserved what they claimed, locking bodies in anaerobic tombs where decay slowed to a crawl. But his heart refused the logic. Elena was too careful, too attuned to the wilderness. She'd navigated these bogs since her undergrad days, mapping sundew patches and dodging sinkholes with a sixth sense. "She didn't drown," Marcus muttered to himself, his breath clouding in the chill. He clutched a hand-drawn map, its edges frayed, marked with annotations like "sinkhole risk" and "sundew cluster." It was the start of an obsession that would consume him. Over the next 7 years, Marcus became a ghost in the bogs, a solitary figure trudging through mist with a notebook and a flashlight. He quit his park ranger job and took up environmental consulting, but his real work was the maps, sprawling, hand-drawn masterpieces that charted water flows, hidden trails, and anomalies in the Hose wetlands. He noted beaver dams that altered channels, otter tracks that hinted at stable ground, and patches of carnivorous sundews that Elena loved. He interviewed locals, loggers who avoided the bogs, botanists who studied them, and old-timers who spoke of the wetlands as a living thing, jealous of its secrets. Marcus's grief was a quiet fire, fueled by guilt. He hadn't joined Elena on that survey, too busy with a consulting gig. If he'd been there, maybe she'd be alive. In Seattle, Detective Sam Harper was no stranger to cases like Elena's. At 48, he was a lean figure with graying hair and hazel eyes that missed nothing, though they carried the weight of his own loss. 20 years ago, his younger sister, Lily, vanished during a camping trip in the Cascades, leaving behind a backpack and a mystery that haunted Sam's every case. He'd joined the cold case unit to give others the closure he couldn't find, his office cluttered with files and a worn photo of Lily laughing by a campfire. At his side was Sammy, a 5-year-old cocker spaniel with a chestnut coat and soulful eyes, trained to detect human remains, chemicals, and subtle environmental cues. Sammy was Sam's partner in every sense, his eager barks and warm nudges a lifeline when cases grew heavy. Sam's reputation for cracking impossible cases came from his blend of grit and intuition. He didn't just follow evidence, he felt it, piecing together stories from fragments others overlooked. Sammy was his edge, the dog's nose catching what human senses missed. A year before Elena's case resurfaced, Sam and Sammy had solved a decade-old missing hiker case in the North Cascades. The hiker's remains, buried under a landslide, were found when Sammy caught a faint whiff of bone through frozen soil. Sam knelt beside the dog, scratching his ears as they uncovered a weathered boot. "Good boy, Sammy," he'd said, his voice rough with pride. That case, like Elena's, started with a family's refusal to give up, and it lingered in Sam's mind as he read about Marcus Voss's relentless search. Marcus's maps grew into a labyrinth of their own, pinned across his small Forks apartment like a tapestry of hope and despair. He marked water levels after storms, noting how they shifted peat banks, and catalogued rare plants like sundews, knowing Elena's work centered on them. He found nothing concrete, no gear, no body, but he uncovered whispers of illegal activity in the bogs. A botanist mentioned rare plants vanishing, possibly poached for the black market. A logger spoke of a reclusive figure, a botanist named Calvin Reed, who knew the bogs too well and avoided questions. Marcus jotted it down, his pen shaking with exhaustion, but the leads fizzled. The bog was too vast, too secretive. Sam, meanwhile, kept Elena's file in a drawer, its news clipping yellowing at the edges. He hadn't been assigned the case, but it gnawed at him. Lily's disappearance had taught him that the wilderness didn't just take people, it hid them, sometimes with human help. He'd talk to Sammy late at night, the dog sprawled across his office floor, tail thumping. "What do you think, boy? Accident, or something else?" Sammy would tilt his head, as if weighing the question, his brown eyes steady. Sam trusted those eyes, they'd led him to truths before. By 2025, Elena's case was a footnote in the news, a tragedy faded by time. Marcus, now 45, was thinner, his face carved by sleepless nights, but his maps were a masterpiece of persistence. He'd charted paths even rangers didn't know, his annotations a mix of science and desperation. High water flow, August 18, possible debris shift. He stood by the bog's edge one evening, the fog curling around his boots like a warning. "I'm still here, Elena," he whispered, clutching her spare locket, its pressed sundew flower a fragile link to her. The bog didn't answer, but its silence felt alive, as if daring him to dig deeper. In Seattle, Sam was finishing a case when a call came from the Washington State Police. A kayaker had found something in the bogs, a GPS device, moss-covered and scratched with a message that would pull Sam and Sammy into the mystery. As Sam hung up, he glanced at Sammy, who was chewing a rawhide bone, oblivious to the shift coming. "Looks like we're heading to the bogs, buddy," Sam said, his voice low but firm. Sammy's ears perked, his tail wagging furiously, as if he knew the hunt was on. For Marcus, for Elena, and for Sam's own ghosts, the bog was about to speak. The Hoh rainforest bog was a world of half-light and whispers, where fog clung to the ground like a shroud and the air carried the sharp, sour bite of peat. In September 2025, 7 years after Elena Voss's disappearance, a kayaker named Tara Lynn cut through a narrow, uncharted channel in the Olympic Peninsula's wetlands. Her paddle dipped into the inky water, stirring ripples that vanished into the mist. She was a biologist, drawn to the bog's eerie beauty, but what she found that morning wasn't flora or fauna, it was a moss-covered GPS device, half buried in a peat bank, its casing scratched with a chilling message, "Trapped, EV." The words glinted under her flashlight, grotesque against the green slime, surrounded by crimson-tipped sundews that seemed to watch her in silence. Tara's hands shook as she pried the device free, its weight heavy with the bog's secrets. The anaerobic peat had preserved it, its screen cracked but intact, the battery long dead. She knew of Elena Voss's case, every biologist in the region did, a cautionary tale of the wilderness's dangers. Tara paddled back to the Hoh Field station, her kayak slicing through the fog, and handed the device to the park rangers. "This isn't right," she said, her voice tight. "That message, it's not an accident." The rangers, recognizing the initials, alerted the Washington State Police, and by noon, the call reached Detective Sam Harper. Sam was in his Seattle office, sipping bitter coffee, when the phone rang. Sammy, his cocker spaniel, lay sprawled at his feet, his chestnut coat catching the dim light. At 48, Sam was a lean figure with graying hair and hazel eyes that carried the weight of too many unsolved cases, none heavier than his sister Lily's disappearance 20 years ago. The officer on the line described the GPS device, the scratched message, and Elena's name. Sam's fingers tightened around his mug. "Send me everything," he said, his voice low but sharp. Sammy's ears perked, sensing the shift in his partner's tone. The bog was calling, and Sam knew this wasn't just a clue, it was a scream from the past. By evening, Sam and Sammy were at the Hoh Field station, a weathered cabin surrounded by cedars. The fog was so thick Sam could barely see the path, the air heavy with damp earth and decay. Tara met them, her face pale as she handed over the evidence bag. The GPS device, caked in green moss, looked like a relic from another world. Sam turned it over, the scratched, trapped EV catching the light. Sammy sniffed the bag, his nose twitching, a low whine escaping as he caught a faint, unfamiliar scent. "Easy, boy," Sam murmured, scratching Sammy's ears. The dog's soulful brown eyes locked on his, as if saying, "This matters." Marcus Voss arrived an hour later, summoned by the rangers. At 45, he was gaunt, his ranger's frame worn by years of searching. His eyes, red-rimmed from sleepless nights, lit with a flicker of hope when he saw the device. "That's hers," he said, voice cracking. "Elena's GPS. She always carried it." He pulled a worn notebook from his jacket, its pages filled with hand-drawn maps of the bogs, water flows, sundew patches, sinkholes marked with precision. "I've been mapping where she went. This came from Quadrant D9, I'd bet my life on it." Sam studied Marcus, seeing a mirror of his own obsession with Lily's case. "We'll check it out," Sam said, his tone steady but warm. "You and me, we'll figure this out." The next morning, Sam, Sammy, and Marcus headed to the bog where Tara found the device. The ground squelched under their boots, the fog curling around Sammy's paws like a living thing. Sam carried the GPS in an evidence bag, its weight a promise and a taunt. Sammy trotted ahead, his nose low, tail wagging furiously as he navigated the uneven terrain. The bog was a maze of peat banks and hidden streams, its silence broken only by the drip of water and the occasional rustle of an otter slipping into a channel. Sam's flashlight cut through the mist, revealing sundews that glistened like tiny traps, their sticky tendrils swaying in the damp air. At the peat bank, Sammy froze, his ears perked, a low growl rumbling in his throat. He pawed at the ground, sniffing intently, catching a faint whiff of something, sundew resin, Sam guessed, or maybe something human. "What is it, boy?" Sam knelt beside him, his gloved hands probing the peat. The bank was disturbed, its surface uneven, as if something had been buried and then shifted by water. Marcus crouched nearby, his map spread on a dry patch. "This channel shifts after heavy rain," he said, pointing to a jagged line on his map. "If her GPS ended up here, it could have been carried from deeper in D9. Sam sent the device to the state lab for analysis, requesting pollen and peat isotope tests. He'd used the technique before. Pollen grains were like fingerprints, unique to each bog, and the bog's anaerobic conditions could preserve chemical traces for years. "If this tells us where it's been," Sam told Marcus, "we'll know where to look next." Marcus nodded, clutching his map, his fingers tracing a sundew patch he'd marked years ago. "Elena loved those plants," he said, his voice soft. "She'd sit for hours, sketching them. Said they were proof the bog was alive." Sam saw the pain in Marcus's eyes, a mirror of his own when he thought of Lily's laugh by that long-ago campfire. Back at the field station, Sam sat with Sammy by a crackling fire, the dog's head resting on his knee. He studied Marcus's map, its sprawling lines a testament to 7 years of grief. "You've done good work," Sam said when Marcus joined them, his voice rough but kind. "This gives us a start." Sammy whined, nudging Sam's hand, as if urging him on. The GPS's message, trapped, EV, gnawed at Sam. Was it Elena's desperate plea, scratched in her final moments? Or something else, something darker? The bog wasn't just hiding evidence, it was hiding a story, and Sam and Sammy were going to uncover it. The Hoh rainforest bog was a world of secrets, its fog thick as a curtain, muffling the squelch of boots and the drip of water from moss-draped cedars. The air carried the sharp tang of peat, mingled with the faint, sweet scent of sundews, their crimson tendrils glinting like traps in the half-light. In September 2025, Detective Sam Harper and his Cocker Spaniel, Sammy, stood at the edge of Quadrant D9, where a kayaker had found Elena Voss's moss-covered GPS device, its cryptic message, "Trapped, EV," etched into the casing. The discovery had reignited a 7-year-old cold case, and now, with Marcus Voss's maps and Sammy's keen nose, Sam was closing in on answers. Sam knelt beside a peat bank, his flashlight cutting through the fog as Sammy sniffed the ground, his chestnut coat damp with mist. The dog's ears perked, his tail wagging furiously as he caught a faint whiff of something, sundew resin, sharp and chemical, clinging to the air. "Good boy," Sam murmured, his voice low but warm, scratching Sammy's ears. The GPS device, now at the state lab, was their best lead, but the bog's labyrinthine terrain demanded more than guesses. Sam needed science to point the way, and Sammy's instincts to confirm it. At the Washington State Police Lab in Olympia, forensic technician Dr. Lila Chen was already at work on the GPS device. Sam had sent it with a request for pollen and peat isotope analysis, techniques he'd used in past cases to pinpoint locations. "Pollen grains are like fingerprints," Lila explained over the phone, her voice crisp as she peered through a microscope. "Each bog has a unique mix, sundews, sphagnum moss, even rare sedges. The peat's isotopes, tied to local water chemistry, can narrow it down further." The device's anaerobic preservation in the bog's low-oxygen environment meant its surfaces might hold clues from years ago. Sam listened, his hand resting on Sammy's head as the dog curled up at his feet, sensing the weight of the moment. The lab results came back in 48 hours. Lila's email was concise but electrifying. The GPS held pollen from Drosera rotundifolia, the round-leaved sundew, and isotopic markers unique to a remote, unmapped section of the bog in Quadrant D9. "It's a needle in a haystack," she wrote, "but your dog might help." Sam shared the findings with Marcus, who stood in the field station's cramped office, his hand-drawn map spread across a table. Marcus's eyes lit up, tracing a line to a dense wetland area he'd marked as high sundew density. "That's where she'd have gone," he said, his voice tight with hope. Elena was obsessed with those plants. Sam decided to deploy a LiDAR-equipped drone, a tool he'd used in a Cascades case to spot hidden trails under dense canopy. The drone, operated by a ranger named Javier, hummed over the bog, its lasers piercing the fog to map the terrain in 3D. The results were startling: a concealed platform, barely 10 feet square, hidden under a tangle of cedars and moss in the heart of D9. It was invisible from the ground, its edges blending into the peat. "Could be a poacher's camp," Javier said, studying the scan. "Or something worse." Sam's gut twisted. Poaching was a dirty business, and Elena's work on rare plants might have put her in someone's crosshairs. With Marcus's map and the LiDAR data, Sam and Sammy set out for the site. The bog was a treacherous maze, its ground shifting underfoot, the fog so dense Sam could barely see Marcus trudging beside him. Sammy led the way, his nose low, pausing to sniff at disturbed peat or a crushed sundew stem. Halfway there, Sammy froze, his growl low and urgent, his eyes fixed on a patch of bog where the peat was unnaturally smooth. Sam knelt, probing with gloved hands, and found a faint indentation. Something heavy had rested there, maybe dragged away. "What did you find, buddy?" Sam asked, his heart racing. Sammy's tail flicked, his nose catching that sundew resin again, sharp and unmistakable. The platform was as the drone had shown, a crude wooden structure, camouflaged with moss and branches, nestled under a cedar canopy. Sammy bounded onto it, his paws sinking slightly into the damp wood, and immediately began sniffing a corner, his ears perked. Sam followed, spotting a faint scrape mark, a box or crate, perhaps, recently moved. Marcus, clutching his map, pointed to a nearby channel. "Water flows here after rain," he said. "Anything dropped could have washed to where Tara found the GPS." Sam nodded, his mind racing. The platform wasn't random, it was a hideout, and Sammy's nose was telling him Elena had been here. Back at the field station, Sam called Lila to discuss the resin Sammy kept detecting. "Sundew resin, sticky, unique," she said. "If it's on the GPS and at that platform, it's no coincidence." Elena was studying those plants, maybe she got too close to something. Sam hung up, his eyes on Sammy, who was chewing a stick by the fire, oblivious to his own brilliance. Marcus sat nearby, his map spread out, his fingers tracing a sundew patch near the platform. "She was onto something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something worth hiding." Sam felt the case shifting, the bog's silence breaking. The platform, the resin, the GPS, they were pieces of a puzzle, and Sammy's instincts were the glue. But the message, trapped, hung over them like the fog itself. Was it Elena's final act, a cry for help scratched in panic? Or did it point to someone else, someone still out there? Sam stroked Sammy's ears, the dog's warmth grounding him. "We're getting closer, boy," he said softly. The bog was still a formidable foe, but with Marcus's maps and Sammy's nose, Sam was ready to face it. The whole rainforest bog was a living maze, its fog curling like a ghost around the gnarled cedars, the air thick with the sour tang of peat and the faint, sweet bite of sundews. In September 2025, Detective Sam Harper and his Cocker Spaniel, Sammy, stood on a concealed wooden platform in Quadrant D9, a hidden outpost uncovered by LiDAR drones and Marcus Voss's meticulous maps. The platform, cloaked in moss and branches, was no accident, it was a poacher's camp, its crude planks stained with the secrets of the bog. Sammy's nose twitched, catching the sharp scent of sundew resin, his chestnut coat damp as he pawed at the wood, ears perked and tail wagging furiously. Sam knew they were close to unraveling Elena Voss's fate, but the bog was still a formidable foe, its silence daring them to dig deeper. Sam crouched, his flashlight sweeping the platform's edges, where Sammy's sniffing grew urgent. The dog's low whine drew Sam to a corner, where a faint glint caught his eye, a silver locket, half buried in the peat, its chain tangled in a sundew's sticky tendrils. Sam's gloved hands freed it, his heart pounding as he saw the inscription, "EV," inside, a pressed sundew flower, its crimson preserved like a memory. "Elena's," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking as he joined them, his map clutched like a lifeline. Nearby, Sammy nosed at a weathered field journal, its pages warped but legible, filled with Elena's precise handwriting, notes on sundew populations, sketches of the bog, and a chilling entry, "Poaching confirmed, sundews vanishing, tracks lead to hidden camp." The journal was a revelation. Elena hadn't just been studying plants, she'd stumbled onto an illegal operation, harvesting rare sundews for the black market. Sam's mind raced, poaching was a dirty trade, and Elena's discovery could have made her a target. "She was onto them," Sam said, his voice low, meeting Marcus's red-rimmed eyes. "This wasn't an accident." Sammy whined, nudging Sam's knee, as if urging him to keep going. The dog's instincts had led them here, and Sam trusted they'd lead further. Marcus's maps were the key to understanding the camp's place in the bog. He spread one out on the platform, his finger tracing a hidden trail marked unstable ground, poacher route. The trail looped from the platform to a nearby channel, where water flows could have carried the GPS device to the peat bank where Tara found it. They used the bog to hide their tracks, Marcus said, his voice steady but laced with anger. Elena must have found this place, confronted someone. Sam nodded, his gaze on the journal's final page, where Elena had scrawled, "CR involved?" The initials sent a chill through him. Could they point to a suspect? Back at the Hoe Field station, Sam interviewed locals, guided by Marcus's years of notes. A logger mentioned a reclusive botanist, Calvin Reed, who'd once worked with Elena but turned solitary, rumored to sell rare plants to international collectors. "He knows the bogs better than anyone," the logger said, spitting into the mud. "Always out there, alone, rubbing sundew leaves between his fingers like a creep." Marcus's face tightened. He'd heard of Reed, a name in his map's margins, linked to odd sightings near sundew patches. Sam filed it away, his instincts humming. Reed was no phantom, he was a man hiding in plain sight. Sam and Sammy returned to the platform at dawn, the fog so dense it felt like wading through smoke. Sammy bounded ahead, his nose low, pausing at a patch of disturbed peat near the camp's edge. His growl was sharp, his paws digging until Sam spotted a buried tarp, its corner peeking from the mire. Beneath it were tools, pruning shears, sample jars, a knife with a worn handle, stained with sundew resin and traces of soil unique to this bog. Sammy's tail flicked, his eyes locked on Sam, as if saying, "This is it." The tools were evidence of poaching, and the knife hinted at something darker. Sam bagged them, his mind on Elena's locket and journal, their personal weight tying her to this place. Marcus joined them, his maps now a guide to Reed's possible routes. "He'd have used these channels," Marcus said, pointing to a snaking line on his map. "They're shallow enough to wade, deep enough to wash away tracks." Sam studied the map, its annotations, sinkhole risk, sundew patch, a testament to Marcus's obsession. He saw his own reflection in Marcus, the way he'd pored over Lily's case files, chasing ghosts in the Cascades. "You've given us a shot at this," Sam said, his voice rough but kind. Marcus nodded, clutching Elena's spare locket, its pressed sundew a mirror of the one they'd found. At the field station, Sam called Dr. Lila Chen, the forensic technician, to rush analysis on the locket and tools. "The locket's got DNA," Lila reported, her voice crackling over the line. "It's Elena's, no question. The knife has traces of her blood, faint, but there. And the resin matches the sundews at your platform." Sam's gut twisted, blood meant violence, not an accident. Sammy, curled up by the fire, lifted his head, sensing Sam's tension. "We're closing in, boy," Sam murmured, scratching the dog's ears. The evidence was mounting, pointing to Reed, but the trapped EV message on the GPS gnawed at him. Why scratch a plea if she was already dead? The camp was a turning point, its artifacts a bridge between Elena's passion and her fate. Sam stood by the platform's edge, the fog curling around Sammy's paws, the bog's silence heavy with answers just out of reach. Marcus's maps, Sammy's nose, and the forensic clues were aligning, but Reed was still a shadow in the mist. Sam felt the weight of Lily's unsolved case, a quiet ache beside Elena's. "We'll find him," he told Marcus, his voice firm. Sammy whined, nudging his hand, ready for the next step. The bog was a jealous keeper, but Sam and Sammy were relentless, and the poacher's camp was only the beginning. The whole rainforest bog was a world of shadows, its fog weaving through cedars like a living veil, the air heavy with the sour tang of peat and the sharp, sweet bite of sundews. In late September 2025, Detective Sam Harper and his Cocker Spaniel, Sammy, stood in the heart of Quadrant D9, where a hidden poacher's camp had yielded Elena Voss's locket and journal, artifacts that screamed of foul play. The bog was no mere backdrop, it was a jealous antagonist, its shifting terrain and dense mist hiding truths that Sammy, and Marcus Voss were determined to unearth. The trapped EV message on Elena's GPS device lingered like a ghost, its meaning elusive, deepening the mystery. Sam knelt on the crude wooden platform, his flashlight glinting off a tarp-covered cache Sammy had uncovered. The dog's nose had led them to a hidden trapdoor, its hinges rusted but intact, concealed beneath a layer of peat and moss. Sammy's ears were perked, his chestnut coat damp as he pawed at the wood, a low whine signaling something significant. Sam pried the trapdoor open, revealing a shallow compartment stuffed with more poaching tools, vials of sundew resin, a ledger of sales to foreign buyers, and a small bag of dried carnivorous plants, their crimson tendrils brittle but unmistakable. "This is no hobby," Sam muttered, his voice rough. "This is a business." Marcus stood nearby, his hand-drawn map spread on a dry patch of the platform, his face gaunt but fierce with purpose. "Elena knew," he said, pointing to a journal entry they'd found, "CR selling sundews, black market confirmed." The initials pointed to Calvin Reed, the reclusive botanist locals had mentioned, a man whose knowledge of the bogs rivaled Elena's. Marcus's maps, with their annotations of hidden trails and water flows, showed Reed's likely routes, snaking through the bog's most inaccessible corners. "She confronted him," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "That's why she's gone." Sam sent the new evidence to Dr. Lila Chen at the state lab. Lila's analysis was swift, the locket's DNA was Elena's, and the knife from the camp bore traces of her blood, diluted but detectable. The sundew resin in the vials matched the chemical signature on the GPS device, tying the camp to the spot where Tara, the kayaker, had found it. "You're looking at a crime scene," Lila said over the phone, her tone grim. "The blood's old, but it's hers. And the ledger, names, dates, payments. Reed's been at this for years." Sam hung up, his hand resting on Sammy's head, the dog's soulful eyes steady as he sensed the weight of the find. The investigation intensified, but the bog fought back. A flash flood hit D9, turning stable paths into quagmires, the water churning with peat and debris. Sam and Sammy navigated the shifting terrain, the dog's nose guiding them past sinkholes that Marcus's maps had marked with warnings like, collapse risk. Sammy's instincts were uncanny, his paws dancing over unsteady ground, pausing to sniff at a crushed sundew or a faint track in the mud. At one point, he froze, growling at a patch of bog where an otter's trail vanished into a hidden channel. Sam probed the spot, finding a submerged rope, part of a poacher's trap, maybe, or a marker for something buried. "Good boy," Sam said, scratching Sammy's ears, the dog's tail thumping despite the drizzle. Marcus's grief was a quiet storm, breaking in moments of memory. Over coffee at the field station, he shared a story of Elena teaching him about sundews when they were kids. She'd hold one up, grinning, saying they were nature's perfect trap, he said, his eyes distant. She wanted to save these bogs, not just study them. Sam listened, his own memories of Lily surfacing, a campfire, her laugh, the way she'd braid wildflowers into her hair. The parallel cut deep, fueling Sam's drive. "We'll get her justice," he told Marcus, his voice firm but kind. Sammy nudged Marcus's hand, as if offering comfort, his warmth a bridge between their losses. The bog's challenges mounted. Fog thickened, reducing visibility to arm's length, and a black bear's tracks near the platform hinted at wildlife stirring the evidence. Sam's team used Marcus's maps to search for Elena's remains, but the bog's anaerobic depths were a vault, preserving bodies but hiding them from sight. The trapped EV message gnawed at Sam. Was it Elena's final act, scratched in desperation? Or a clue to another player, someone Reed worked with? The ledger listed buyers, coded initials, no names, but none matched EV. Sam's doubts grew, mirrored by Marcus's hope for closure, a tension that drove them deeper into the bog. At night, by the field station's fire, Sam studied the journal, its pages filled with Elena's sketches and notes on poaching. One entry stood out: CR seen at dusk, quadrant D9, carrying heavy bag. It was dated the day before she vanished. Sam glanced at Sammy, sprawled by the hearth, his tail twitching in a dream. "You're leading us to her, aren't you?" he murmured. Sammy's eyes flicked open, as if agreeing. The evidence was mounting: Reed's camp, the blood, the ledger, but the bog held one more secret, and Sam knew it was tied to that haunting message. The hunt was far from over. The Hoh rainforest bog was a labyrinth of mist and menace, its fog coiling around ancient cedars, the air thick with the sour tang of peat and the faint, predatory sweetness of sundews. In late September 2025, Detective Sam Harper and his Cocker Spaniel, Sammy, stood on the cusp of unraveling Elena Voss's 7-year-old disappearance. The poacher's camp in Quadrant D9, with its damning evidence, Elena's locket, her journal, a knife with her blood, pointed to Calvin Reed, a reclusive botanist whose illegal sundew trade had turned deadly. Marcus Voss's maps had guided them here, but the bog remained a jealous adversary, its secrets guarded by shifting terrain and suffocating mist. The cryptic, trapped, EV message on Elena's GPS device hung over them, a puzzle piece that refused to fit. Sam's investigation had zeroed in on Reed, a solitary figure known to locals as a ghost in the bogs. At 52, Reed was lean and weathered, his hands stained with sundew resin, his eyes sharp but guarded. He lived in a remote cabin on the edge of the Hoh, its walls lined with botanical sketches and jars of dried plants. Sam's team had tracked him through Marcus's maps, which marked Reed's hidden trails with annotations like "Sundew Harvest Site" and "Frequent Dusk Activity." The ledger from the trapdoor, listing coded buyers and payments, tied Reed to an international black market. Elena's journal, with its note of "CR involved" and a blood-stained knife, sealed his guilt. Sam knew it was time to confront him. The trek to Reed's cabin was perilous, the bog's ground sucking at Sam's boots, the fog so dense it swallowed sound. Sammy led the way, his chestnut coat damp, his nose low as he navigated hidden channels. Marcus followed, his maps clutched tight, his face a mix of hope and dread. Sammy's ears perked at a faint rustle, a beaver darting through the reeds, but his focus never wavered. At the cabin, a ramshackle structure half claimed by moss, Sammy froze, his growl low and urgent. His eyes locked on a shadowed corner, where a trapdoor lay hidden under a pile of peat-sodden crates. "Good boy," Sam whispered, scratching Sammy's ears, the dog's instincts a warning of danger. The Hoh rainforest bog was a world of mist and memory, its fog curling through moss-draped cedars, the air heavy with the sour tang of peat and the faint, predatory sweetness of sundews. In late September 2025, Detective Sam Harper and his Cocker Spaniel, Sammy, stood at the edge of Quadrant D9, where Calvin Reed's confession had cracked open the 7-year-old mystery of Elena Voss's disappearance. The bog, a formidable antagonist, had yielded its secrets reluctantly, but with Marcus Voss's maps, Sammy's keen nose, and forensic breakthroughs, Sam had brought justice within reach. Yet the cryptic, trapped, EV message scratched on Elena's GPS device lingered, an unanswered question in the mist. Guided by Reed's confession, Sam's team returned to the poacher's camp, a crude platform hidden under the bog's canopy. The fog was relentless, swallowing sound and sight, but Sammy led the way, his chestnut coat damp, his nose low as he sniffed out the pit Reed described. The dog's ears perked, his tail wagging furiously as he paused at a patch of disturbed peat, its surface unnaturally smooth. Sam knelt, his gloved hands probing the mire, and found the edge of a deep pit, its anaerobic depths a perfect tomb. The excavation was slow, the bog's grip fierce, but by dusk, they uncovered Elena's remains, preserved by the peat's low oxygen. Her backpack, journal, and GPS were there, but the scratched device Tara found remained separate, its origin a mystery. Marcus stood nearby, his face pale, clutching his hand-drawn maps like a lifeline. When the team recovered Elena's locket, its silver chain tangled with a pressed sundew flower, he broke, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his cheeks. "That's her," he whispered, taking the locket from Sam. The artifact, inscribed with DV, was a piece of Elena's passion, a symbol of her fight for the bogs. Sam placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, his voice low but kind. "She's home now." Sammy nudged Marcus's leg, his soulful brown eyes offering quiet comfort, his warmth a bridge across 7 years of grief. Calvin Reed's trial was swift. The evidence, Elena's blood on the knife, her DNA on the locket, the ledger of black market deals, and Marcus's maps pinpointing his routes, was overwhelming. Reed was convicted of murder and illegal trafficking, sentenced to life without parole. In court, he sat stone-faced, his hands no longer rubbing sundew leaves, his isolation complete. Marcus attended, his maps folded away, his mission fulfilled but his heart heavy. He later planted a patch of sundews near the Hoe Field station, a living memorial to Elena's love for the bog. "She'd have wanted this," he told Sam, his voice steady but soft, the locket now a keepsake around his neck. The trapped, EV message, however, defied resolution. Reed's denial was firm, he hadn't seen the GPS device Tara found, insisting he'd buried Elena's gear with her. Sam pored over the evidence, his mind turning over theories. Had Elena scratched the message in her final moments, a desperate plea as she faced Reed? Or was there another figure, someone who found the device later, adding the inscription for reasons unknown? The bog's shifting channels could have carried it to the peat bank, but the message's purpose remained elusive, a thread left dangling in the narrative of Elena's death. It added a raw edge of realism, a reminder that not every truth could be unearthed. Sam grappled with the ambiguity, his thoughts drifting to his sister, Lily, lost to the Cascades 20 years ago. Her case, like the GPS message, was a wound that wouldn't close, its questions unanswered. He sat by a campfire near the bog, the flames casting shadows on the cedars, the fog a soft curtain around him. Sammy sprawled at his feet, his head resting on Sam's knee, his chestnut fur warm against the chill. Sam stroked the dog's ears, his voice low. "We got her justice, buddy," he said, the words heavy with both triumph and loss. "But Lily's still out there." Sammy whined, nudging Sam's hand, his eyes steady, as if promising to keep searching. The fire crackled, its light dancing on the bog's edge, where sundews glistened like stars in the mist. Marcus had found closure, planting Elena's legacy in the soil she loved, but Sam's journey was unfinished. The bog had given up one secret, but it held others, its silence a challenge for another day. Sam leaned back, Sammy curling closer, their bond a quiet vow to face the next mystery together. Somewhere, in another wilderness, answers waited, and Sam and Sammy would find them, one scent, one clue, one case at a time.